What is good, everyone? Welcome to this video. I'm Charlie from Conscious Creation, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you the story of the Anunnaki. Now, there is a part of me that didn't really want to do this video. I was sitting in meditation the other day. This is usually where I get my insights for my next video. I kept getting the impulse, Anunnaki. I was like, I don't really want to be talking about aliens and gold, but it prevailed, so I'm going to talk about it with you today. Now, do I believe everything that I'm about to say? No. Do I believe in some of it? Yes. Do I think it gives us some answers to some unanswered questions? I do. Do I find it interesting? Yes, I'm going to talk about it today. Now, as a kid, I was always asking the big questions. Why are we here? What's the purpose of everything? So I was always going to dive into this type of information. Now, most of this information comes from Zecharia Sitchin, and it's all about how ETs came to this planet and artificially mutated our DNA. And if this is true, it's the key to understanding our next step in evolution as human beings. Now, this presentation should really last about 2 weeks, so I'm going to give a very abridged version of it. So we're going to start off by talking about Zecharia Sitchin. Now, he was a scholar and he went to the University of London, after which he went to a place called Nineveh. And this place, Nineveh, is in Sumeria. Now, this is where he came across 22,000 clay tablets known as the Sumerian tablets. And these are actually the oldest form of recorded history for human beings. They're 2,000 to 3,000 years older than that of the Bible. Anyway, he went about and decoded these tablets and put together the story about human origin. So this story starts with a planet named Nibiru. Now, this planet is deep within our solar system. NASA knows about it. They call it Planet X. Now, the thing about this planet is that it has an elliptical orbit, which means it goes towards the sun and away from it. I'm not sure how the science of that works, but it's what it says in the text. Now, the thing is when it comes close to the sun, it builds up a lot of this heat and a lot of radiation. And when it goes away from the sun, it's able to maintain a lot of this heat in the core of this planet. So when it gets really cold, the inhabitants can survive. Now, the beings on this planet are known as the Anunnaki. And they wanted to figure out a way to reduce the radiation when they got close to the sun to help preserve that atmosphere, and how to maintain more heat when they went away from the sun. And they figured out the best solution for this was gold. So they went about our solar system looking for gold, and they happened to stumble across planet Earth. Now, planet Earth is abundant with gold. In the text, it says it comes close to planet Earth every 3,600 years, and that they first came to Earth 450,000 years ago. And so they came across Earth, they shuttled across, and they started to get this gold by using this certain type of sound technology. Now, in the text, it talks about how these beings came from the sky, these fallen angels, also referred to as the Nephilim. And they referred to them as gods because they were much larger than human beings. They were 12 to 16 feet tall. Now, if you study the work of Junvalo Melchizedek, what he talks about is when we start to evolve our consciousness, eventually the body starts to change and also starts to grow. So, and there's also evidence of large skeletons on our planet as well. And if you look at places like that of Egypt, all these paintings about these beings being much larger than us today, also with their big heads as well. So they were looking for gold to help preserve more heat for their planet when they went away from the sun, and to help reflect the heat when they actually got close to the sun. Now, even our scientists have considered using gold to help reflect heat away from our ozone layer to help with that of global warming. Now, after a while, so every 3,600 years, is they would come to Earth, they would shuttle across in their ships, and they would get as much gold as they possibly could. Now, after a while, the leader, known as Enki, and his half-sister, Nina Zag, we could say that they were the head scientists. They wanted to figure out how they could get more gold, how they could create a more efficient way of getting more gold to their planet, Nibiru. So they came up with an idea. They said that when they next come to Earth, they are going to find the most primitive species on the planet at the time. Now, it's hypothesized that the most primitive species at the time was Homo habilis. And so Enki went about and used the DNA, his own Anunnaki DNA, to artificially mutate it into that of these Homo habilis. And this is supposedly, according to the story, is where Homo erectus came from. And these beings, they looked very similar. They all had dark hair, dark skin, dark eyes. And they actually named the first being Adama. Now, a lot of scholars nowadays are starting to believe that the Genesis, the creation story, is simply an abridged version of this Anunnaki story, Adama and Adam and Eve. This also supports the ancient astronaut theory, which is the theory that extraterrestrials have artificially mutated our DNA. There was even a study in 2013 about this. And it was published, I'll see if I can remember their names, but we got a mathematician named Vladimir Zermak and an astrobiologist named Maxine Makokov. And they published this study on the human genome. And they said that there was this hidden code within the DNA that had this unknown symbolic language to it. And the sequence within this DNA, they said the chances of that sequence was 1 in 10 trillion, which really supports the idea that this DNA was actually put within us. Now, I'm now going to talk about something called RH blood, and it's going to make a bit more sense down the line. But we've got something called RH positive blood and RH negative blood. Now, this RH blood is completely independent from blood types A, B, AB, and O blood. Now, it was believed that all the Homo erectus had this RH positive blood. Now, if you've got RH positive blood, it means you have a particular type of protein on the surface of your red blood cell. If you don't, you're RH negative. Now, we know that we're 95 to 98% compatible with chimpanzees. Our DNA is very similar to them. Now, if you have this RH positive blood, it means you have something called the rhesus monkey gene. Now, most people on the planet are RH positive. Over 85% of people are RH positive. In places like Native America, over 95% of people are RH positive. In places like Asia, it's 98 to 99% of people are RH positive. Now, as Enki was going about his business, making sure that the gold was being mined, he came across a couple of female Homo erectus. It is then said in the text that he slept with these female Homo erectus, and he was seduced by them, from which came a new being named Zia Zudra, which is also known as Noah, which again is a completely different story in itself. But it was said that this being had fairer skin, fairer eyes, and fairer hair. And it's also hypothesized this is where the RH negative blood actually came from. And it's also hypothesized that this might have been the start of where Homo sapiens actually came in. Because if you read the book Sapiens, it talks about how we came into, or how Homo sapiens came about very suddenly 200,000 years ago, and that this Rh negative blood has actually had no evolutionary change to it. So over these thousands and thousands of years, the Rh negative blood has stayed just the same. If you look at the work of Greg Braden, he talks about something called the genome number 2 and how it's 8% of our DNA, and that this part of the Rh negative blood has not actually evolved. This is where it gets quite interesting, because if we have a look at the birthing process, let's say we got two people, partners, a man and a woman. Let's say the woman has Rh positive blood and the man has the Rh negative blood, and they decide to have a baby together. Now, if the baby has this Rh negative blood, and during the birthing process, if too much blood leaks from the baby and into the mother's system, her Rh positive blood starts to reject the baby's Rh negative. It sees it as foreign and it creates antibodies, and this is known as red cell alloimmunization and often leads to things like that of miscarriages. The interesting part is, where else is this a big problem? This is a big problem in hybrid animals, which would suggest the hybrid part within ourselves being part extraterrestrial. If you want to know a bit more about Adama and Zecharia, I recommend the book, The Lost Book of Enki. If you want to learn a bit more about the Anunnaki and Nibiru, I recommend the book, The 12th Planet. Now, also just on a little side note as well, when it comes back to Zecharia, talking about that of Noah and the Great Flood, it was said that this Great Flood actually wiped out all of the gold mines. In the 1970s, in Southeast Africa, is they started to mine gold in exactly the same place that the Anunnaki were also getting their gold, with no recollection or no knowledge of the Anunnaki story. Now, coming back to the part where Enki and Nineveh were changing or artificially mutating the DNA of Homo habilis to that of Homo erectus, it says in the text that Enki only programmed the DNA for its basic coding. He did not switch on the advanced coding, so the beings would stay more in a primitive state of being, and they would continue to mine the gold and they wouldn't question things. Now, the interesting thing is that we only use 3% of our DNA. 97% of our DNA is junk DNA. Now, if you look at the work of Michael Tellinger, he wrote a book called The Slave Species. Now, in this book, The Slave Species, he talks about that if we start to understand more of our human origin, is we're able to overcome more of our primitive, our animalistic, and our slave-like nature, and we're able to start activating that of our dormant DNA. We're able to start activating more of that divine part within ourselves, and we start to take our power back. Do you ever wonder why we're always chasing things? Why we always seem to be in survival mode? Why we're always looking at the worst case scenario? He says this is because we've only got that primitive part within our DNA activated, and that if we can start to activate more of that other part of our DNA within us, is we start to get our power back. So thank you for watching. Like I said, don't believe everything that I've said. Use your own discernment, do your own research. But apart from that, peace, much love, and take care.